Hello, my name is Molly, and today I will be demonstrating the use of the Gracey 1314 Curette on my dentiform. So this is what the instrument looks like. This is an area-specific curette, and it's designed for scaling just the distal surfaces of the posterior teeth. It can remove both supragingival and subgingival calculus. So here we can see the cross section of the instrument. It has a rounded toe, and so that allows for safe subgingival instrumentation. And also it has an offset blade, so we'll only be using the lower cutting edge on the specific areas of those distal of the posterior teeth. So in order to find a correct working edge or correct working end, we'll just make sure that the terminal shank is angled toward the edge that we're working on. So here we would be using the side to do the distal of the lower right quadrant on the buckle. So since the blade is offset, we'll just make sure to be using the correct working end on all times. And throughout the video, I'll just be using the modified pen grasp and fulcruming on my ring finger and rocking on my ring finger so that I can practice effectively removing calculus. So next I'll get into the demonstration. Alright, so I'm starting on the upper right quadrant, buccal surfaces. So start on tooth number 1, just doing the distals with the 1314. So I want to insert my instrument at a 0-degree angulation for safe subgingival insertion, and then I'll establish my 70 to 80 degrees with the cutting edge. And also forgot to mention too, I have my correct working end. I know that because the cutting edge is facing the surface that I'm working on, and also the V of the instrument is pointed towards the distal. So once I establish that 70 to 80 degree angulation, then I'll rock on my fulcrum. And now I'm moving to the lingual side on the upper right. So same thing here, inserting at a 0-degree angulation and then establishing my 70 to 80 degrees. And since this instrument already has an offset blade at that 70 to 80 degrees, we're just going to keep the instrument parallel to the long axis of the tooth, the surface that we're working on, so that we can effectively remove calculus. And for these first couple molars, I was using an extraoral fulcrum. Then I moved to an intraoral on the same arch so that I can do those premolars on the distal surface of those teeth. And I want to use short controlled strokes to activate with lateral pressure when I feel calculus. So now moving on to the buccal surfaces on the upper left quadrant. I'm also just doing the distals here with 1314 and starting with the extraoral fulcrum. And also importantly, I want to just adapt the tip third of my instrument at all times so that it is adapted to the surface I'm working on, so that it is safe and I'm not lacerating the papilla or anything. And that way, when I have my correct angulation of that 70 to 80 degrees and correct adaptation of that tip third, that's how I'll effectively be able to remove the calculus with short controlled strokes and just activating with lateral pressure when I feel the calculus to remove. So there we are on the premolars. And now moving to the lingual side of the upper left. So I've changed the side of the instrument that I'm working on so that I have the correct working end, just using the lower cutting edge so that we're just making sure, we have the correct working end. And once again, just want to insert at that 0-degree angulation, establish my 70 to 80 degrees, making sure the terminal shank is parallel to the long axis of the tooth. and then rocking on my fulcrum to activate with lateral pressure to use short and controlled strokes to effectively remove the calculus. So I'm mainly using direct vision, but also just have my mirror there in case I need it. So next, just moving on to the mandibular arch. So doing the lower right quadrant, the buccal surfaces. So here inserting at 0 degrees and then establishing my 70 to 80 degrees. I want to keep my tip 1/3 of the instrument adapted to this tooth, and as I'm going more interproximal, I'm slightly rolling my instrument so that the tip third can stay adapted. So as I roll into that contact, keeping the tip third adapted and then activating with lateral pressure, kind of a simultaneous motion. And I'm just fulcruming a few teeth ahead so that I can establish a fulcrum on my ring finger. Since the instrument has a longer shank and bend, it can reach posterior more easily. And so now I'm just moving on to the lingual surfaces on the lower right. And same thing, just want to establish my 70 to 80 degree angulation, keeping the instrument parallel to the long axis of the tooth, keeping the tip 1/3 adapted, and using short controlled strokes. I've changed the side of the instrument that I'm working on so that I'm using the lower cutting edge. I'm using my mirror here for indirect vision so that I can see those lingual surfaces very clearly in the mirror. And next, on the last quadrant here, I'm doing the buccal surfaces on the lower left. So also here using my mirror so that I can see the distal side of these teeth. And I'm making sure I'm using the correct working edge or working end with the lower cutting edge. And just repositioning there so I can do these premolars there. We skipped number 19 since there's no tooth there. And establishing my angulation 70-80 degrees, keeping the instrument parallel to the long axis of the tooth, keeping the tip 1/3 adapted. And then finally I'm doing the lingual surfaces on the lower left. So I've changed the side of the instrument that I'm working on so that I can use the lower cutting edge, and just fulcruming a couple teeth ahead. We skipped number 19 obviously since no 19, and just want to keep that tip 1/3 nicely adapted and activate with lateral pressure to remove calculus with a short controlled stroke. Alright, so that was my video using the Gracey 1314 to practice removing calculus from the distal of the posterior teeth. So I'm working on my tip third adaptation using short and controlled strokes. So next week in my final video, I will be demonstrating the Gracey 1718. So thank you very much for watching.